Watch closely because what looked like a divine prophecy turned into something no one expected. You won't believe how a single church moment flipped into one of the biggest controversies the gospel world had seen in years. It all started when gospel singer LaAndria Johnson, known for her powerful voice and fearless faith, suddenly spoke out against Pastor Lovy Elias, a man many saw as one of the most gifted modern prophets. For years, Pastor Lovy had built a name on what he called heavenly revelations, giving prophetic words that often went viral. But this time, his words met the wrong person. Let me tell you, this is how everything began to change. A video appeared online showing Pastor Lovy standing before his packed congregation, his tone calm but commanding. The crowd hung on his every word as he said God had given him a message about LaAndria Johnson, a message about her spiritual state and her next season. His followers cheered. They said it was proof of divine connection. But here is the shocking part. LaAndria saw the same clip and didn't feel blessed. She felt exposed. To her, it wasn't a message from heaven. It was a public display that crossed a sacred line. Hours later, she went live on her social media and said 8 words that made the internet explode. That wasn't prophecy. That was manipulation. Those 8 words spread faster than any sermon. Within hours, gospel blogs were posting about it. Fans were arguing, and church commentators were taking sides. Some said she was being rebellious and unspiritual. Others said she was brave for saying what many had felt but were too scared to admit. And this is where it gets interesting. What looked like a simple disagreement turned into a deeper conversation about how some pastors were using their influence in the name of prophecy. People started replaying the clip again and again, this time not to feel inspired, but to look for signs of control. LaAndria's voice shook as she spoke, but her words carried weight. She said no one should speak for God about her life unless God told her first. It was raw, real, and completely unscripted. She wasn't hiding behind church talk or polite phrases. It felt like a cry from someone who had seen too much of the church's polished side and wanted to tell the truth. The craziest part, her live video felt more powerful than most sermons people had heard that week. The way she looked into the camera, her tone filled with fire and pain, it made everyone stop scrolling. For some, it was uncomfortable. For others, it was freeing. Soon, the church world was split in two. Pastor Lovy's supporters defended him fiercely. They said LaAndria was out of line, that prophets speak what others can't see, and that she should have respected the man of God. But LaAndria's supporters fired back, saying enough was enough. They said too many people had been hurt by prophecies that were really just personal opinions dressed in holy language. Destiny took an unexpected turn when even people outside the church world started joining the conversation. It wasn't just about religion anymore. It became about power, honesty, and the courage to question authority. Behind the scenes, more stories started surfacing. People began whispering about moments when they too felt manipulated by church leaders. Private messages turned into public comments. Old clips of pastors prophesying over people began to resurface, and suddenly everyone was asking the same question: when did prophecy become performance? LaAndria's voice had started something no one could stop. Even those who once ignored her began to see her differently. What makes this story different is that she wasn't just calling out a man. She was calling out a system that praised control but punished honesty, a system that turned spiritual moments into viral shows. As the storm grew online, Pastor Lovy remained silent, but silence didn't stop the noise. His followers kept defending him, quoting scriptures and posting about loyalty. Yet, the louder they defended, the more people started digging deeper. They rewatched his old sermons, searched his other prophetic moments, and began to wonder how many of them were truly divine. And this is how one singer with one sentence made the church look in the mirror. Leandria had always been known for her rawness, sometimes too raw for church people. But this time, her rawness wasn't rebellion, it was revelation. The storm didn't slow down, it only grew louder. By the next day, social media was on fire. Everyone had an opinion, and everyone wanted to be heard. You won't believe how fast the story spread. Leandria's name was suddenly everywhere, on gospel blogs, reaction videos, and even mainstream talk shows. Some called her brave, others called her bitter. But here is the shocking part. She didn't back down. Instead of trying to calm things down, she spoke again, this time with even more boldness. She said, "Don't tell me what God said about me if he didn't tell me first." That line hit like thunder. It was simple, but it exposed something deep. People began to wonder, were all these modern prophecies really about God, or were they about control? Let me tell you, this is where it gets interesting. Church members from all over started sharing their own experiences. Some said they too had been embarrassed in public by leaders who claimed to be speaking for God. Others admitted they had once believed every word from their pastor, even when it didn't sit right in their spirit. The conversation changed overnight, from one celebrity clash to a serious question about how far the modern church had drifted. It wasn't about hate, it was about honesty. And what made this story different was how real it felt. People were no longer defending titles, they were defending truth. As the days went on, new voices joined in. Some gospel artists quietly supported Leandria by reposting her clips with short captions like, "She said what needed to be said." Others stayed silent, afraid of losing church invitations or fan support. The craziest part was that many of those who disagreed with her still couldn't stop talking about her. Even Pastor Lovy's own supporters started asking quiet questions. They wanted to believe he was right, but something about his prophecy didn't feel pure anymore. Behind closed doors, church members whispered that things didn't look good. Some even said that the ministry's reputation was shaking from the inside. Destiny took an unexpected turn when Leandria posted another video, but this time her tone was softer. She wasn't yelling or clapping back, she was calm. She said, "I know what it feels like to be used by the church and then left out to dry." Her eyes told a story that words couldn't. In that moment, even her critics began to understand. This wasn't about revenge, it was about healing. You could feel the pain in her voice, the kind of pain that only comes from someone who had once believed too deeply. That lit video wasn't just another viral moment. It was a confession, a release, and a warning all in one. And this is how the controversy grew into something bigger than anyone expected. News outlets began covering the story, calling it the Gospel Showdown. Hashtags like hashtag prophecy or performance and hashtag church manipulation started trending. People who never cared about church gossip were suddenly glued to the updates. They wanted to see what would happen next. Would Pastor Lovy respond? Would Leandria apologize? But the real twist was neither happened. Pastor Lovy stayed silent and Leandria stood her ground. That silence said more than any sermon could. It made people wonder what was being hidden and what truths were about to come out next. By this time, the internet wasn't just watching, it was investigating. You won't believe how deep people started digging. Old clips of Pastor Lovy's prophecies began to resurface, and viewers started to notice patterns. Some said his messages always seemed to target well-known figures, almost like he was using their names to stay relevant. Let me tell you, this is how the story took a darker turn. What had started as a disagreement about one prophecy now became a debate about the entire prophetic culture in modern churches. People began asking, are we following God's word or a man's fame? But here is the shocking part. While the internet argued, Leandria disappeared for a few days. No live videos, no posts, nothing. Her silence created more curiosity than her words ever could. Fans worried something might have happened, while critics said she was running from the backlash. Then, out of nowhere, she came back online, calm but powerful. She said, "I ain't hiding, I'm just praying." Because when truth shows up, lies start shaking. That one sentence brought the fire right back. This is where it gets interesting. People who once doubted her began to say, maybe she really was being led by something higher. Soon, the story started to change direction. It wasn't just about Pastor Lovy anymore. It became about the church itself, about how people had turned prophecy into performance. Believers started questioning everything: the live stream miracles, the stage reactions, the dramatic background music during sermons. LaAndria's words hit harder now. She had said, if your prophecy embarrasses somebody, it ain't God. If it's meant to control somebody, it ain't God. Those words echoed across social media like a warning bell. People started realizing how often spiritual authority was being used to silence or control them. What makes this story different is that LaAndria wasn't perfect, and she never pretended to be. She was open about her struggles, her battles with addiction, her fights with church people, her mistakes. But that's what made her message hit harder. She wasn't speaking from a place of pride. She was speaking from experience. The craziest part was how relatable she suddenly became. People who once judged her for being too raw started saying she was the only one telling the truth. It was like her pain had turned into prophecy of its own, the kind that doesn't predict the future, but reveals what's really happening right now. Destiny took an unexpected turn when even some pastors started agreeing with her, quietly, of course. They posted indirect messages saying things like, "Not every word from the pulpit comes from heaven." That's when everyone knew this controversy had struck a nerve. Behind the polished sermons and smiling faces, there was real tension. Some church leaders feared this would open a floodgate of truth-telling that could shake the foundations of their ministries. And they were right. LaAndria had started a movement without even trying. The more people tried to silence her, the louder her truth became. The noise had reached its peak, but instead of fading away, it started to echo deeper. You won't believe how the story transformed from gossip into a call for change. People who had never spoken about faith before were now asking hard questions. Let me tell you, this is how everything began to shift. Comment sections under Pastor Lovy's videos were filled with divided opinions. Some still defending him fiercely, while others admitted that something about his words didn't feel right anymore. It wasn't about hate or judgment anymore. It was about truth. And for the first time, the gospel community looked like it was being forced to face itself. But here's the shocking part. While everyone argued online, LaAndria returned to doing what she loved most, singing. She went back on stage, not to preach, not to clap back, but to worship. Her performance that night was emotional, raw, and filled with tears. Between songs, she said softly, "God don't need PR. He just needs people who will tell the truth." Those words hit differently. The crowd went silent, some people cried, and others just nodded. It was clear that this wasn't about her versus a pastor anymore. This was about light versus illusion. This is where it gets interesting. After that performance, even some of Pastor Lovy's quiet supporters began to pull away. They didn't say it publicly, but they started to rethink everything. Old followers unfollowed, church members left quietly, and rumors spread that even people inside his ministry were asking questions. And destiny took an unexpected turn when, instead of fading into scandal, LaAndria's message started inspiring a movement. People began posting their own stories, confessing how they had been hurt, silenced, or spiritually manipulated by leaders who use God's name for power. What once looked like a controversy had turned into a healing process for thousands. The craziest part was that LaAndria never said she wanted to destroy anyone's ministry. She said she just wanted honesty. She wanted people to stop worshiping preachers and start listening to God for themselves. Her courage became contagious. Pastors, singers, and believers began to speak up, some with trembling voices, some with fire in their hearts. It was as if her truth gave them permission to finally breathe. The fear that had kept so many silent was breaking, one story at a time. And for the first time in a long time, people were realizing that faith didn't need to be polished to be powerful. By now, the storm had quieted online, but its impact was still spreading. Pastor Lovey never made a public statement, and maybe he never would, but his silence spoke volumes. Meanwhile, LaAndrea kept moving forward, not as a victim, but as a voice. She didn't claim to be perfect or prophetic. She just stood for truth. And maybe that was the point all along. Because when you strip away the titles, the fame, and the noise, what's left is what really matters. Faith that's real. The kind that doesn't need a camera or a crowd. And that's how one woman's defiance became a movement, how one moment of honesty turned into a mirror for the entire church. In the end, this story wasn't about who was right or wrong. It was about what happens when truth refuses to stay quiet. Because, as LaAndrea proved, the truth doesn't need a title. It just needs someone brave enough to speak it.